At 3:06 a.m., a massive dog burst through a kitchen window, leaving a trail of blood, and no one knew what he was trying to save. Deep in the woods waited Gerald Harlan, a man whose name had faded from headlines but not from nightmares. Only Bear, the rescue dog no one wanted, sensed the truth and led his owner to a child long thought lost. But just wait until you hear how this haunting story twists, and how justice finally roared back to life. It was exactly 3:06 a.m. when the sound shattered everything. A violent crash, sharp, brutal, final, ripped through the silence of the Ohio countryside like a scream that had been held back too long. Carolyn Davis, 42, jolted awake in her creaking bed, her pulse hammering in her throat. For a second, she thought she'd dreamed it, but the next beat of silence was too heavy, too unnatural. Then came the chill. The farmhouse, old and weather-worn, had its own language, groaning floorboards, whispering rafters. But this wasn't part of its vocabulary. This was something else. The sound had come from the kitchen. Without thinking, Carolyn's hand reached under the bed and gripped the handle of the wooden bat her husband had left there, a habit from the years they spent raising kids in a town that had grown quieter and emptier since the factories closed. He'd always said, just in case. He was gone now, a year to the day. The anniversary she hadn't mentioned aloud. Ever since the crash on Route 47, the house hadn't felt right. Nights seemed colder. Shadows lingered longer. And Bear, her husband's old dog, a golden retriever built like a bear and just as stubborn, was the only presence that gave the place warmth. But now, Bear wasn't there. That terrified her more than the sound itself. He never left her side, not once. Since the funeral, Bear had slept by her feet like a silent sentinel, never more than a few steps behind. Losing her husband had been unbearable. If she lost Bear too? Another sound, the soft crunch of something heavy stepping through glass. Glass. Carolyn crept down the hall, heart punching against her ribs, bat trembling in her grip. She flicked on the flashlight and stepped into the kitchen, and her breath caught. The window above the sink was gone, not broken, obliterated. Curtains whipped in the wind, stained dark. The floor glittered with jagged shards. Something had blown straight through it from the inside. Then she saw him. Bear, standing in the middle of the backyard, chest heaving, front paws bloodied from the glass. He'd shattered himself. He wasn't growling. He wasn't pacing. He was barking, fiercely, rhythmically, at the woods beyond the fence. Not just noise. It was patterned, urgent, almost pleading. Bear? Carolyn's voice broke, barely a whisper. The flashlight beam trembled in her hand as she stepped closer, and Bear didn't even glance back. His stare was locked on something in the trees, his body frozen, muscles tight. Bark, bark, bark. Then she saw it. Just beyond the fence, between two dark trunks, something moved. A flicker, then stillness. Then again. Small, barefoot, human. Carolyn's stomach dropped. She leaned forward, squinting. It was a child, dirty, in a torn shirt, no shoes, no coat, in the freezing dark. She didn't move like a kid playing games. She moved like someone trying not to be seen. And Bear had seen her. That's why he broke the window. He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to save her. Carolyn didn't think. She ran. Her boots slapped against the porch Sunday step and hit the cold earth hard as she sprinted after Bear, who had already vanished into the black tree line. Her flashlight wobbled in her grip, casting chaotic halos across the tangled brush and fog. The temperature had dropped sharply, and each breath scraped her lungs like broken ice. "Bear!" she called, but her voice felt paper-thin against the wall of night. The woods swallowed it, like it had swallowed everything else. She caught glimpses of movement, Bear's golden fur, flashes of his tail, the frantic rustle of undergrowth pushed aside. But it wasn't just Bear she was chasing. The girl, the barefoot child with fear in her eyes. Then, just like that, the forest exhaled. Stillness. A clearing opened like a wound in the trees, pale light spilling through broken branches overhead. And there she was, the child, no older than 7, maybe 6. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with grime and tears. She stood with her back to the tree, arms limp at her sides, her chest rising in short, sharp breaths. Her legs were bare, her feet, numb raw, dug into the frozen soil. But she didn't cry, she didn't move. She just stared. Carolyn stumbled into the clearing, breath catching in her throat. Bear stood between them, his body low, his head high, ears forward. Every muscle in him was tense like drawn wire. His fur bristled down his spine. Carolyn dropped to her knees, tears stinging her eyes before she even realized they were falling. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" she said softly, setting the flashlight on the ground and reaching out, her hands trembling. "Are you hurt?" The girl didn't speak. She simply raised one trembling hand and pointed into the dark. Carolyn turned, slowly. That's when they heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the woods, a dragging step, wet, deliberate, steady. It echoed between the trees like something heavy being pulled. Then, a voice, male, calm, too calm. "Lucy, where'd you wander off to now?" the voice called, thick with mock sweetness. "You know this isn't playtime. You're going to get me in trouble again, sweetheart." Carolyn's blood turned cold. She pulled the girl close, backing up instinctively as her flashlight beam bounced across the woods. Bear growled low in his throat, the kind of sound that made hair rise. Then the figure stepped into view. A man, tall, broad, dressed in grease-stained coveralls, boots caked in mud. He held something in one hand, maybe a thick branch, maybe something worse. But it was the expression on his face that turned Carolyn's stomach. He smiled, not warmly, not kindly, a twisted, hollow kind of smile. His eyes stayed dead. Carolyn rose and placed herself in front of the girl, lifting her voice with every ounce of steel she had. "Stay back. I've already called the police." The man didn't flinch. He lifted one hand lazily, palm forward, as if he were calming a skittish dog. "Now, ma'am," he said, voice syrupy, "this is a family matter. Best you head on home. You don't want to get involved in something that's not yours." But it was too late. Her fingers were already on the screen. 911 was ringing. Her voice cracked as she gave the operator her name, location, every word falling from her mouth in a rush. And then he moved. No warning. The man surged forward in a blur of motion, closing the gap between them like a bolt from the dark. But he wasn't fast enough. Bear launched. All muscle and fury, the retriever sprang like a hammer released from tension, intercepting the man mid-charge. The impact knocked the intruder sideways, the flashlight rolling in the leaves, its beam catching just enough to show Bear's frame, anchoring itself between the attacker and the women behind him. Carolyn didn't look away. She didn't run. She held the girl close and whispered, "I've got you. You're safe now." But even she knew. This night was far from over. Bear struck first. He collided with the man mid-charge, locking onto his arm with force that dropped them both. The scream that followed wasn't words. It was raw, terrified, and real. Carolyn didn't look back. She ran, Lucy tight in her arms, her fingers dialing again, this time for an ambulance. By the time police arrived, Bear was still on his feet, bloodied, breathing hard, but standing guard beside the man's motionless body. Officers pulled him back gently, and when they ran his ID, the pieces began to fall into place. Gerald Harlan, a name that hadn't surfaced in years until now. 5 years ago, he'd been a person of interest in a case involving 2 missing children. The trail went cold. No evidence, no answers. Until Bear blew open a window at 3 a.m. Lucy, it turned out, wasn't his daughter. She was one of the missing, one of the names on the posters, one of the lost, found in the nick of time. A search of Gerald's property uncovered photos, maps, and notes. Proof this wasn't the first time, but it would be the last. And Bear, the quiet rescue dog no one wanted, was the one who stopped it. The next day, Carolyn sat by his side at the vet clinic, her hand on his chest. "You didn't just break a window," she whispered. "You broke the cycle." From that night on, whenever Bear barked toward the trees, Carolyn turned on the light, because some monsters don't hide under beds. They hide in the woods,